Hi, this is Nee. I'm the Marketing and Communications Specialist at CARE.
I'm Melissa. I'm one of the violence prevention coordinators at CARE, and you are listening to The Narrative Project.
Hello everyone, I'm Nee, and today we have a special episode for you. We are so excited to be joined by some amazing colleagues and community members. Today we will talk through our 7th episode of The Narrative Project within a Zoom meeting room. Before we get into what we will be talking about today, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, their pronouns if they would like, and a quick description of ourselves and the Zoom background. I can go ahead and get started. So my name is Nee. I use she and her pronouns. I have medium black hair. I'm wearing light teal sweater, and my background, we have purple flowers from the UCI campus.
My name is Melissa Bader-Huskin. I use they, them pronouns. And today I am wearing a gray beanie and I have blue rectangular-ish glasses. I am wearing a purple shirt with a vest-like cardigan that's gray with blue stripes on it. In my background today, I went with a beautiful sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge up in San Francisco.
So I am Candace Whalen. I use she, her pronouns. I have long brown hair and I'm wearing a dark blue sweater. My background is also blue and it says UCI Care and has the contact information in the upper left corner. I am a family nurse practitioner and will be a provider over at Student Health.
Great, I'll go next. My name is Abby Highland. I use she, her pronouns. I have, mid-length blonde hair. There's some fishtail braids now. And my background is a beautiful beach with the waves and the palm trees moving. And I am the Alcohol and Other Drugs Program Manager at UCI currently, and I'm housed in the Center for Student Wellness and Health Promotion.
Hi, I'm Angelica Silverman. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I have medium length, shoulder length, curly brown hair. I'm also wearing earrings. I am wearing a pink t-shirt with a burgundy cardigan over it. And I'm a prevention education intern at the UC Santa Cruz Care Office.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very excited for us to get started in our conversation today. So we're going to explore the relationship between media and sexual violence, and we'll also have a chance to discuss different movements that have taken place over the years. So with this in mind, we recognize that there's only a few folks discussing this topic in the Zoom room, and we may not cover all of the different contexts and definitions and experiences that relate to this topic area. And so please keep that in mind. This is only a snapshot of the conversation, and we really do encourage you to delve into these topics with folks around you as well.
Starting off with the first question, what role does media play in sexual violence?
When I was thinking about this question, actually, I kind of broke it up into lots of different parts. Mainly, and I kind of wrote different descriptions about it. The first thing that came to mind was kind of news, how news affects our perception of sexual violence. And then that kind of goes into social media because we see so much news on our social media nowadays, which also is on our TV. I feel like that's all encompassing. But then there's also TV shows itself and then movies that kind of are the same thing, I would say. And then I think through social media too, there's different movements that we see. And I think all of these can be really positive and negative too, just depending. But a lot of them circle back to things that you're just going to see on this generic news platform too. And if things blow up on social media, you're going to see it on a news platform. So I feel like that was like the biggest thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this question.
When I thought of this question, I think it brought me back to my younger self and just how I felt like sexual violence was almost normalized. And then, now as an adult and seeing different movements that have happened since, especially Me Too, and how much more aware it would seem that the public is, it always surprises me how much sexual violence we still see in the media. So I almost feel like we've become more aware, but we haven't necessarily censored or become more sensitive in the media that's out there.
I definitely agree with the both of you. When I was thinking about this question, I kind of was jotting down notes about it yesterday, and I interpreted media as not only social media, but I interpreted it as TV and movies. And so I thought about how like you said, Candace, how normalized sort of violence and sexual violence in general is in society. So I thought of how media could perpetuate gender roles, traditional gender roles of this power and control dynamic between, in the traditional sense, a heterosexual male and a white woman. It's typically how it's depicted in the glorification. And I thought of a scene in particular. I was a big fan of the movie 16 Candles growing up. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but I thought of one of the scenes that stuck out the most was when the nerd who is, in love with this cheerleader, beautiful, like popular girl who has a girlfriend who's dating Jake Ryan. She's incapacitated. She is unconscious at a party, and her boyfriend actually carries her over his shoulder and gives her essentially in the same car to the nerd and says to, quote, have fun with her. And the next morning, of course, she wakes up, doesn't remember anything, and she realizes that she may have had sex with this person who she originally thought may have been her boyfriend, but she was unconscious. And so it brought up examples like that and how pervasive those are in society, and how it not only normalizes it, but it romanticizes this sort of behavior in general.
Yeah, it's interesting because, that movie came out so long ago, and my mom loved that movie. And I know even when I was younger, I know I saw that movie. I can't remember what age I was, and not to throw my mom under the bus, but I'm sure I was in elementary school because it was just considered a cute, almost innocent movie. And when you bring up particular scenes, you realize that was considered acceptable. And there's still so many movies that have kind of similar scenes or similar context, I guess you would say, where it's, maybe the characters are a little different or the situation is a little different, but it's still that idea of that being normal or that being okay. Because there was never, at least in my recollection, a period in that movie where there's anybody condoning somebody walking out of a party with an individual that's passed out and just dumping them in another unknown vehicle. So it's interesting because we're trying to, ideally through these, movements like Me Too, educate the public, educate for me, my patients, or for me, my children even, about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. But then these are the messages that are out there, billboards or commercials, these different kinds of power dynamics and hypersexual scenarios that are almost hidden in these kind of innocent shows or movies or whatever else it might be.
I think a lot about that. That's something that is really, either I feel like there's a lot of movies, TV shows that we see where there's a lot of sexual violence that goes unnoticed or unacknowledged, which kind of perpetuates kind of the stereotype or just allowing for that to happen. But then on the other spectrum too, you have so many shows more recently that have shown the actual sexual assault and people going through the trials and like coming forward. And I think those can be really empowering, but also problematic sometimes too, because I think about 13 Reasons Why. It always comes to mind because I feel like the ideas behind that show were so great, but so terribly done, because the sexual assault that they portrayed was so extremely triggering. I think a majority of people who've experienced sexual assault, and I know the suicide that they like explicitly showed in that as well, was removed because it was extremely triggering. So I think there's like this spectrum of like not acknowledging that things are happening at all, which is extremely dangerous, then to also overdoing it and triggering people who have experienced sexual assault.
They wanted to go about the show to, in a way, educate individuals, but they just executed it poorly. And as a result, they re-triggered individuals who may have experienced sexual assault. And in the end, it was harmful, more so than helpful.
There is that piece too of what you're talking about where it's triggering. And then sometimes too, when we are showcasing folks that are able to get justice and showcasing kind of that full trial process or showcasing how they go about their healing journey, it sometimes sends this message of if your experience is not pervasive enough to meet this kind of level, then invalidate's not the right word, but it's kind of like it sends this message of sometimes this concept of like, oh, is it a big enough deal, almost, with how these things are being portrayed in the media. And so it's this weird fine line of how do you make sure that you're addressing it so that you don't have something like what happened in 16 Candles, where it's just a thing and people are okay with it, but you're not overdoing it, where you're not triggering people, but you're also not accidentally invalidating some experiences, because we know that it's such a wide range of experiences. And I was actually just having a conversation earlier with some of our peer educators of the care office, and one of the examples from media that I think really showcases a good way of like supporting survivors is this TV show called Sex Education. And it does a really good job of showcasing how responses can vary, and there's a lot of different experiences. But as we were watching the clip from the show, I realized that all of the experiences are from strangers and they're not from acquaintances. And we know that most sexual violence happens by someone that the survivor knows. And so even something like that is, while I would recommend watching the show, I personally love it. I think that it's a really great example. There's also those pieces too where I wouldn't want someone to watch it and be like, oh, it's more normal in this way, when we actually know statistically that is a myth that needs to kind of be debunked a little bit too. And so it's that weird middle ground to be in.
Well, I think you make up a good point. I don't think we recognize how pervasive sexual violence is, not just in the media, but in individuals' lives. And I think part of that reason is because more often than not, it's an acquaintance or a friend or a known entity. There's that question of, is it significant enough to do X, Y, or Z to the perpetrator of this violence? And there's also that question of, has it been too long to say anything? And I think we saw a lot of that, going back to kind of news in the Brett Kavanaugh trials, and not to get too political, but that idea of, there are definitely multiple sides and opinions around that whole scenario, but not even thinking about what those opinions are, but just looking back in a neutral way at what were those conversations. And some of those conversations were around, has it been too long? What are individuals' motives? So then you wonder, if you're dealing with a survivor, how do you expect anybody to be comfortable coming forward? Because if it's not a very clear-cut situation, or there's any kind of questionable act on either side, going back to 16 Candles, should that female character have drank so much that she was unaware of her surroundings? What was her liability in that whole scenario? I think with the Me Too movement, we tried, I say we very broadly, to bring attention to those situations and how pervasive sexual violence is. But then it was just almost right after there was this trial, and those conversations go back to these very traditional opinions and beliefs around what is sexual violence, what is considered significant enough to make a stink about it, to say something, to kind of threaten those relationships, even if they're casual acquaintances, of just kind of wanting to go along and avoid confrontation at any cost.
Thank you so much for bringing up the Me Too movement, because when I was first sent these questions, that's exactly what came up for me. What's interesting for me now is I think that social media can be harmful in some ways, but can also be extremely helpful. So you bring up the Me Too movement and how there was a large collective of individuals, on social media posting their stories and disclosing the fact that they had experienced forms of violence, and particularly sexual violence, to a wider audience. And so it made it more normal for other people to feel as if they could come out and speak up against this form of violence. I recently stumbled upon an amazing Instagram page. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's called the Chalk Back organization. And they have different sort of representatives, particularly women who have experienced violence in different cities around the country and even around the world. There's a chalk back of Bengali. And so they all run pages called Cat Calls Of. And so essentially their project is to raise awareness about how pervasive catcalling is and how that is in itself a very extreme form of violence. And it's dismissed a lot of the time. You know, it's kind of ignored. We talk about cases of this, as you mentioned before, these concrete, you know, to the book like rape cases, but in reality, the majority of those cases are not to the book. And I use to the book in quotations because every case varies and there's no one depiction of sexual assault. It's so different depending on the situation. And so what the page essentially does is they have these representatives who run the Cat Calls Of pages, draw in chalk and do beautiful designs, but they draw in chalk different cat calls that people have sent them via Instagram DMs and direct messages. And they just make a huge mural with names of individuals who have been affected or killed by sexual violence, and as well as different cat calls that people have received. So when you're walking down the street, you see this and you stop and look at it and you recognize that this isn't something that is talked about, and it should be more, because, you know, as we're talking about sexual violence, that is a form of sexual violence, and it's so pervasive and it's so common. And I feel as if when we bring up the conversation of stalking and dating violence and sexual assault, that sometimes gets ignored. So I think it's really important that we tie that into the conversation as well of what it looks like on the day-to-day. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone touching you per se. It can look a lot of ways, and it can look like someone screaming obscenities at you or flashing you, and all of it is pervasive and all of it is terrible. And so, yeah, it just reminded me of the Me Too movement a little bit, of these pages and how not only is it just pervasive in the United States, it's pervasive worldwide.
I've actually seen a lot of this on social media too lately, from the more positive side, because I could talk about the negative side too, but I thought I'd share this because I just saw this recently and I followed this page. It's from my hometown, but it's like an 86th list page, and it started probably like back in June, I can't remember, and I started noticing that they started posting a lot about this one tattoo artist. And people would, you know, like they would DM and talk about all the terrible experiences that they have working at all these businesses and expose them. But this wasn't just exposing how bad the businesses were, it was exposing the harassment and the violence they had received from this one tattoo artist in the area. And after a few people posted, they started receiving, I think, up to 30 or 40 DMs, and they started building a case against this guy. This is actually ongoing, so you can follow it. But it's really interesting because at first I kind of was like really skeptical about this page. My mom and I were talking about it, like, is this really helpful? Because it seems like a lot of this stuff is actually just really nitpicky and harming businesses during a really hard time. And then this happened, and I was like, well, I mean, imagine this guy could have been getting away with this forever. I mean, it's very clear he is, like, at this point, I think they have a case full of 40 people. It's pretty nuts how social media can be so powerful to make people feel like they're not alone. But in the case, like being like, oh my gosh, this guy did the same thing to me. And also the power of that social media, the person who owns that site, which is anonymous, is like the one who is working with the lawyer. I don't know how they're paying for it, if it's pro bono or anything, but they're the one who's doing all the work to build the case. So I thought that was a really, really cool, unique, like new example of how I think social media is changing sexual assault and violence.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Part of that's scary too, because it's almost like you're guilty without a trial. It's a fine line because, you know, you're assuming, and likely correctly, that this individual did these horrible things. That's one thing with social media that's interesting is, you know, you have the power to, without someone getting a fair trial or representation in front of a jury or mediation or whatever it might be, to essentially punish somebody socially pretty significantly. I lived in Philly last year. I guess it was a year and a half ago now. We had this great restaurant down the street. It was known, I mean, even when I lived in California, it was one of those places I was told to go by. And then with the Black Lives Matter movement, there were individuals that came out saying that one of the chefs was really had made racist comments and just was very terrible to work for. And to this day, I have no idea the merits of these accusations. They may have been completely right on, they may have been false, but his business is closed. And so I never heard his side of the story. And there's a chance that there was no defense for his actions if they are true. The idea of innocent unless proven guilty is kind of dismissed when these social trials, if I guess for lack of another term for them, take place. I don't know. I feel kind of both ways about it because, I do think it's great to be able to bring people together and, courage is in numbers to come out and say, this happened or that happened. And if someone is, to this conversation, participating in sexual violence or creating an unsafe work environment or an uncomfortable work environment for a group of individuals, you want that to stop. But then almost who are we is kind of what I go back to.
I think you're right, like in the power of numbers too, because that's why I've been so skeptical of that too. And I think it's so like, and there was other allegations too, but only by one person. And I think that's where it gets kind of, not whether it's true or not, but people question that more. And I thought just the power of so many people coming forward really makes, I think, at least me believe it. I mean, as much as I want to believe the other ones, I do, but I think that unfortunately there's a lot of people in this world that still are going to report false allegations. And I have like a statistic that always stays in my mind. It's from the documentary, The Hunting Ground. If you've all seen it. Yeah, it's a great one. I think, so it said like 92 to 98%, and this is based off a bunch of literature reviews of sexual assault or harassment allegations are true. So that means about 8 to 2% of them are false. But I think we publicize all the, and see so many ones that are false that it's so hard to kind of trust and believe sometimes, it's not good. But, that's what you see in the media. You see the false allegations because when there's a false allegation and it's proven to be false, like they're going to publicize the heck out of it. So I think that's what gives me my doubts sometimes, which I don't think it's healthy, but I think it's kind of the way that social media has shaped the way I view social media.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So, I'm, I guess, truthfully a survivor of sexual violence. I remember when Me Too first came out, I was very angry. I felt very angry. And a lot of people I was friends with on social media were making, were like hashtag Me Too to these situations. And I remember feeling so angry that it was so easy in this new collective platform to come out with a story, whatever that story might be. But for individuals who had truly tried to report, especially in my situation, it was over 20 years ago, nobody took me seriously. And I remember just feeling angry that it seemed so easy because now you had this power of numbers to come out and make kind of blanket statements and get empathy. But then for a lot of survivors, that's not their experience when they're trying to come out. Because, I think, Abby, it was your point that a lot of these perpetrators of sexual violence are acquaintances. Well, sometimes they're closer than acquaintances. So coming out, especially in real time, means that you could be very actively a singular individual destroying a business. You could be destroying a family. There's such a ripple effect when someone comes out, and even not in real time, but comes out with a true allegation that's trying to make a case and trying to go to the police or trying to go to a university or whatever outlets there are. And I almost felt like with the Me Too movement, it made it seem like anybody who's a victim should just report it. You have all this support. It's so easy. And I feel like with Me Too, what I ended up finding is individuals that I was friends with, a significant number would share stories of their experiences maybe 20 years ago. But in the moment, the idea of reporting was really difficult. And I don't know that I think that this movement, that Me Too, changed that for individuals that experience sexual violence today. I think it made it easy for people who had a event, and this is again me just making assumptions from my own experience. I think it made it easy for people who are distanced from it to say something, but in the moment we stopped really paying attention and being empathetic to what someone's going through and what it means to report. Because right now, 20 years have passed. I live on my own. I'm married with kids. I can share because I have no repercussions to sharing. I don't care any longer what anybody thinks. But at the time, one of the main reasons I didn't come out is I was like, this would break my father's heart. And then, I was working at a brand new restaurant. If I reported that this brand new restaurant, that this situation had happened, I mean, that would have been terrible media for this like new up and coming place. And I mean, it was just, again, even though that individual wasn't a close friend of mine, what it would do to my family, what it would do to a business, what it would do to how uncomfortable it would make my coworkers, I couldn't do it. I tried. I mean, there were a lot of things happened at that point. It was 20 years ago, but I think it's just interesting because I almost feel like there needs to be more support around those individuals who report. Because when you do see the one individual who really steps up and points a finger and really tries to build a case, what I see in the media is more individuals attacking the victim than anything else. Though when it's a lot of people, a huge amount of people, like the Me Too movement, then they have that power numbers and everybody's, applauding and supporting. But when it's a singular person standing up there, I think we're all aware of what really reporting how many people are impacted. It's harder to support that because that could mean that you're trying to, close a restaurant down that hires so many individuals. Or so I kind of go back and forth with, how positive is the social media? Because there are things like cat calls and that kind of thing. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, so we're bringing attention to it, but are we making it better for victims? Are we making any real changes? Because I don't know. I don't know that things have really changed.
Sorry, I just have something to ask because I'm curious. This really made me think about it. Is it about like getting justice for victims, which in that case is probably, you're right, more immediate, because once you talk about it in the Me Too movement, it's much easier 5 years later, I think, to talk about it.
Right.
Versus in the moment. Yeah. So is it about helping people get justice? Because to be honest, social media doesn't usually totally help with that. I think you're right. I know someone very near and dear to me who reported sexual assault with like clear evidence, to be honest, like pictures. This is actually ongoing, and she decided to go through the case, and it obviously broke apart her family. And it's a year later, they finally get to the trial, and she decides not to come. So obviously social media blew up saying that everything was fake. It was already doing that before, but then he got let off too. I mean, this whole like long process she decided, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the one person who does it. And she had enough evidence that she felt like she would win. And it gets down to it too. It's like, how much energy do you have to put into that? Because that's just so much, to be honest. A year later, showing up, trying to testify against a family member. And I feel for that person too, because that's where I see where there's still no justice, and social media has proven her to become this person who made up a lie. Mm-hmm. And I get what you're saying. That's just kind of what I'm saying.
And I feel like maybe that's the disconnect with the movement of Me Too, is if those individuals who believe in Me Too want it to be meaningful, then it's almost like there needs to be an avenue for somebody like your friend or acquaintance, whatever your relationship was to this individual, to be able to get that mass of people around them, rather than just supporting one another and saying, me too, I was there too. Where's the support for those individuals that are really taking a stand and going against the what's comfortable for their social circle, what's comfortable for their family, what's comfortable. They're the ones that are really brave, that really need the support of everybody who's hashtagging me too. How does social media get there? And is anybody interested in getting there?
And I think you bring up a really good point, Candace, around what's the goal from the victim survivor? Like, why are they sharing their story in that moment? And I think you brought up a multitude of reasons why people wouldn't want to report, because there's a lot more. That question is a very heavy question. There's a lot to consider. And sometimes people just want to share their story, and sometimes people want to go through the reporting process. Sometimes they're not really sure what they want in the moment and things like that. And I think another thing that happens sometimes with social media is once these experiences are put out into the world, sometimes people will take it and then they run with it and they forget to check in with the person that shared their experience and making sure that they're doing what that person wants. I can think of a bunch of examples, whether personal or of loved ones, where something was shared in that moment, another person takes it upon themselves to find justice, but their definition of justice might not be what the person is wanting for justice. And so keeping that in mind, and I think that's a really good question of like, what is the goal of not just the Me Too movement of, is it to get support for these individuals, or is it to get a bigger mass or things like that? But also, what is the goal of the person sharing their experience? Because as you mentioned, it's not easy. And I'm always concerned of more power being taken away from someone that already has had power taken away from them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, this is my first time talking about anything publicly. And one of the reasons is because it's easier. There's no ripple effect. I mean, I don't anticipate my parents finding this podcast, and that's really the only person I'm concerned about even now. But for me, one of the other reasons I hadn't said anything is because before now I felt like, what's the point? Unless I'm going to be paying it for doing something with it just to make me feel better, I don't know that that's reason enough. But I think getting a position at student health and knowing that I'll be working at student health and maybe now in a position to empower somebody who comes in with a experience, and whether that means they want to report it or they just need support, I want to provide more support than I was given as a student going to student health. Being involved in these conversations for me is a way to maybe not get justice, but at least try to be a pebble in a river, like try to create like some kind of ripple of change. Maybe more and more people who come out and say that sexual violence is real and that it's close to home and it's pervasive in our culture, in our media, everywhere, will hopefully get individuals who don't believe it's a real problem to at least recognize maybe it is, so that when a victim is standing up there, they're not against all these voices that are doubting them or calling them a liar, or saying that they just want to ruin this person's life, or, all of a sudden you see these situations where it's almost as if we're victimizing the perpetrator of a crime, because it's just, we're so comfortable with the norm that we don't want to impact that at all, I guess. It's one of those things, like, is the Me Too movement, was that exactly what we needed to stand up against sexual violence? Did it do anything? Did it increase the doubt that this is a real problem? I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows.
I think that media plays a part in creating these types of dialogues and thinking about what we can do to support other people or whether it is helpful. The only way for us to move forward and to see change is to start with a dialogue. I remember learning about Chanel Miller's experience, and in particular, when she shared her personal experience with us. She said that with Brock Turner, a lot of people in media will portray him as, which is true, he's originally from a prestigious school, an athlete, great with friends. And she said, those aren't false, right? They're true,
Mhm.
but two things could exist, right? His experience as a student, a great friend, can still be true, but the impact that he had on her and what the harm that he caused is still valid. And I think that when she said that, it resonated with me so much. And I continue to have these dialogues with people because of the things she said and through the things that she personally experienced through media as well. And so I don't know where we are right now, but I at least personally believe that whether we are moving back in some ways, we are moving forward in other ways. Thanks for tuning into the Narrative Project podcast.
We hope you all enjoyed the dialogue we had today.
Please remember, should you need support from the CARE office, please call us at 949-824-7273 or email us at care@uci.edu. Our services are available to UCI students, staff, and faculty members Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. PST.
The UCI Counseling Center is available at 949-824-6457 and offers 24-hour access to counselors by phone.
And for Waymaker's 24-hour hotline, they can be contacted at 949-831-9110 in South Orange County or 714-957-2737 for North Orange County, and they can provide resources and referrals for survivors of sexual assault.
Human Auction's 24-hour hotline is available at 877-854-3594 and provides resources, safety, and support for individuals experiencing relationship abuse.
For those outside of Orange County, the National Sexual Assault Hotline can be reached at 1-800-656-4673 or through online chat at rainn.org. That's RAINN.org for resources and referrals for survivors of sexual assault.
And the National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-7233 or through online chat at thehotline.org. That's THEHOTLINE.org for resources and referrals for survivors of individuals experiencing relationship abuse.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please be sure to share it with someone you know and join us for our next conversation. Bye for now.